The massive ships of the Zeltharian Empire hung in space like dark metal mountains. Their hulls were covered in spikes and weapon ports that could destroy entire planets. For 3,000 years, these ships had brought fear to every corner of the galaxy. No species had ever dared to challenge the Empire's power. Emperor Vorthak sat on his throne made from the bones of 100 different alien species. His yellow eyes glowed with satisfaction as he watched the reports coming in from across his territory. Taxes collected on time. Rebellions crushed. New worlds added to his collection. Everything was as it should be. The throne room was enormous, with walls that stretched up so high they disappeared into darkness. Thousands of different alien species knelt on the cold stone floor, all of them servants and slaves to the Empire. Some had scales, others had fur, and many had features that would be impossible to describe. But they all shared one thing. They were all afraid. General Krex, a tall creature with 4 arms and metal teeth, approached the throne. His heavy boots echoed in the silent hall. He carried a data tablet in one of his hands and tried to hide his nervousness. "The Emperor did not like to hear about problems, my Emperor," Krex said as he knelt down. "We have received a message from the outer territories. A new species wants to make contact with us." Vorthak leaned forward on his throne. His claws scraped against the bone armrests. "A new species? How interesting. Are they strong enough to be worth conquering?" Krex looked at his tablet. "They call themselves humans, my Emperor. They come from a small system near the galaxy's edge. Their ships are basic, their weapons are simple. They say they want to talk about peace and trade." The Emperor laughed. The sound was like metal grinding against stone. "Peace, trade? How amusing. These humans clearly do not understand how the galaxy works." He stood up from his throne, his massive form casting shadows across the entire hall. "What do they offer us?" "They want to send a diplomat, my Emperor. Someone to speak for their entire species." Vorthak's laugh grew louder. "A diplomat? They send one person to speak to the ruler of half the galaxy." He turned to look at the kneeling aliens around him. "Do you hear this? These humans think they can negotiate with us as equals." The crowd of servants and slaves said nothing. They had learned long ago that speaking without permission meant death. "Very well," the Emperor said. "Let them send their diplomat. We will show the galaxy what happens when lesser species forget their place. Prepare the execution chamber. This will be a lesson for everyone to see." 3 weeks later, the human ship arrived at Zelthar Prime, the capital world of the Empire. The ship was small and silver with no visible weapons. It looked like a toy compared to the massive Zeltharian warships that surrounded it. Ambassador Sarah Chen stepped off her ship with only a small team of advisors. She was a middle-aged woman with short black hair and calm eyes. She wore a simple blue uniform with the symbol of Earth on her shoulder. She carried no weapons and showed no fear, even though she was surrounded by creatures that could tear her apart with their bare hands. The Zeltharian guards were confused. Most species that came to Zelthar Prime arrived as prisoners or as new slaves. They came in chains, crying and begging for mercy. But this human walked with her head high, looking around with curious eyes like she was a tourist visiting a new city. "I am Ambassador Sarah Chen," she said to the guards in perfect Zeltharian language. "I am here to speak with Emperor Vorthak about relations between our peoples." The guards looked at each other. They had never heard a prisoner speak so calmly. One of them, a creature with green skin and too many teeth, stepped forward. "You will kneel when you speak to Zeltharian citizens," he growled. Sarah smiled. "I kneel only to my own people and my own flag. I come here as an equal, representing the free humans of Earth." The guard raised his weapon, but another guard stopped him. "The Emperor wants to see this one alive. For now." They led Sarah through the streets of the capital city. The buildings were tall and black, reaching up into the poisonous yellow sky. Millions of different alien species filled the streets, all of them marked with the brands that showed they belonged to the Empire. They stared at the human as she passed. Some had never seen a species that walked without chains. The Imperial Palace was even larger than Sarah had expected. The walls were covered with trophies from conquered worlds, flags, weapons, and stranger things that she could not identify. Guards stood at every door and cameras watched every corner. This was a place built to show power and create fear. Emperor Vorthak waited for her in the main throne room. Sarah had seen pictures of him, but meeting him in person was different. He was enormous, over 10 feet tall, with skin like black leather and claws that could cut through steel. His yellow eyes seemed to glow in the dark hall. "So, Vorthak said, his voice echoing off the walls. "This is the human Diplomat. You are smaller than I expected." Sarah walked forward until she was standing in the center of the room. She did not kneel. "Your Majesty, I come here to speak about peace between our peoples. Humanity offers friendship and trade. We believe that cooperation is better than conflict." The Emperor stared at her. Around the room, his servants and guards whispered to each other. No one had ever spoken to Vorthak this way before. "You speak of cooperation," Vorthak said slowly, "but you do not kneel. You do not show respect to your superior." "I show respect to worthy leaders," Sarah replied, "but I will not kneel to anyone. That is not the human way." The whispers stopped. The entire room became silent. Emperor Vorthak's eyes began to glow brighter. His claws scratched the armrests of his throne. "Not the human way?" he repeated. "You think your ways matter here? You think your small species has the right to make demands?" Sarah remained calm. "I think all species have the right to dignity. I think the galaxy is big enough for everyone to be free." Vorthak stood up from his throne. His shadow fell across Sarah like a dark cloud. "You are wrong, human. The galaxy belongs to the strong. The weak exist only to serve." He turned to his guards. "This creature has insulted the Empire. Take her to the execution chamber. We will broadcast her death to every world under our rule. Let them all see what happens to those who refuse to kneel." As the guards moved toward her, Sarah did not try to run. She looked directly at Emperor Vorthak and spoke in a clear voice that carried throughout the hall. "You have no idea what you've just done. Humanity remembers everything." The guards grabbed her arms and dragged her away, but her words continued to echo in the throne room long after she was gone. 3 days later, the execution was broadcast across the Empire. Millions of aliens on thousands of worlds watched as Ambassador Sarah Chen was brought before the cameras. Even facing death, she stood straight and showed no fear. "Any last words, human?" Emperor Vorthak asked. Sarah looked directly into the camera. "My name is Sarah Chen. I came here in peace. I die here because I would not kneel to a tyrant. But my death will not be forgotten. My people will remember, and when they do, this empire will learn what humans are really capable of." The execution was quick, but as Sarah Chen died, something else was born. Across the galaxy, in hidden places and secret meetings, beings who had lived under the Empire's boot for generations began to whisper a new word: hope. And on a small blue planet at the edge of the galaxy, humanity began to plan. The message reached Earth 47 hours after Ambassador Chen's execution. The signal came through a hidden communication relay that Sarah's team had placed on a small asteroid before reaching Zelthar Prime. The transmission was short and simple. Package delivered. Mission failed. Chen is gone. President Maria Martinez sat in the secure conference room deep beneath the Capitol building. Around the table were the most powerful people on Earth: generals, scientists, intelligence chiefs, and the heads of every major government. But today they all looked like ordinary humans dealing with terrible news. "She knew this might happen," Martinez said quietly. "Sarah volunteered for this mission knowing the risks. She wanted to give the Empire one chance to choose peace." Admiral Chen Williams, no relation to the deceased ambassador despite sharing a name, placed his hands flat on the table. They made their choice. The question is, what do we do now? The room was silent for a long moment. Through the reinforced windows, they could see the blue sky of Earth, peaceful and beautiful. It was hard to believe that somewhere out in the darkness of space, their representative had just been murdered for refusing to kneel. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the head of the Xenobiology Division, opened her tablet and began displaying holographic images above the table. The images showed dozens of different alien species, their homeworlds, their technologies, and their cultures. "For the past 50 years, Dr. Vasquez said, we have been studying every species in this region of the galaxy. While other civilizations focused on building bigger weapons or conquering more territory, we focused on learning. We sent hidden observation teams to hundreds of worlds. We intercepted thousands of communications. We studied their languages, their customs, their fears, and their weaknesses." General Robert Hayes leaned forward. "You're talking about intelligence gathering. But what does that give us against an empire with thousands of ships and billions of soldiers?" Dr. Vasquez smiled, but it was not a pleasant smile. "Knowledge is power, General. And we know things about the Zeltharian Empire that they don't even know about themselves." She changed the display. Now it showed a map of the galaxy with different regions marked in various colors. The Empire controls 43% of the known galaxy. But here's what they don't want anyone to know. They're not as strong as they appear. The map zoomed in on specific systems. The Empire rules through fear, but fear only works if you can back it up. Their military is spread thin across thousands of worlds. Most of their subject species hate them and only obey because they have no choice. Their supply lines are vulnerable. Their communication networks have weaknesses, and their leadership is corrupt and paranoid. President Martinez studied the display. What are you suggesting, Doctor? I'm suggesting that we don't try to beat them in a straight fight. We can't win a war of ships against ships or soldiers against soldiers, but we can win a war of minds against minds. Dr. James Park, the head of psychological operations, stood up. Dr. Vasquez is right. We've been analyzing Zeltharian psychology for decades. They have several key weaknesses. First, they believe absolutely in their own superiority. Second, they cannot imagine being defeated by a lesser species. Third, they rule through fear, which means they're afraid themselves, afraid of losing control. Admiral Williams frowned. How does that help us? Because fear is contagious, Dr. Park replied. And we're about to become their worst nightmare. President Martinez looked around the table. Explain. Dr. Vasquez brought up a new set of images. These showed detailed plans of Zeltharian military bases, communication centers, and supply depots. Sarah's mission was never just about diplomacy. She and her team placed monitoring devices throughout Zeltharian space. We now have real-time intelligence on their operations. We know where their ships are, where their supplies go, and how their commanders think. More importantly, Dr. Park added, we know which species in the Empire are ready to rebel. The Krillians in the Nexus sector have been planning an uprising for decades. The Thakari on the mining worlds have weapons hidden in their work sites. The Zephyrians have been secretly organizing resistance cells for over a century. General Hayes began to understand. You want to coordinate these rebellions. Not just coordinate them, President Martinez said, understanding the plan. We want to make them happen all at the same time, all across the Empire. Make it impossible for the Zeltharians to respond to all of them. Dr. Vasquez nodded. But that's just the beginning. While the Empire is dealing with rebellions, we'll be targeting their infrastructure, not with missiles or bombs, but with something much more subtle. She brought up technical specifications that made the military officers lean forward with interest. Computer viruses designed specifically for Zeltharian technology. Communication jammers that will make their networks unreliable. Supply line disruptions that will look like accidents but happen too often to be coincidence. And psychological warfare, Dr. Park added. The Zeltharians have several ancient superstitions that they try to hide from their subject species. We're going to make them think their own legends are coming true. President Martinez stood up. Everyone in the room turned to look at her. Are you telling me that we can bring down an empire that has ruled for 3,000 years? We're telling you that we can bring down this empire, Dr. Vasquez said. It won't be quick. It won't be easy. But it can be done. How long? 2 years. Maybe 3. The room was quiet again. Outside, Earth continued its peaceful rotation around the sun. Children played in parks. People went to work and came home to their families. Life continued as it always had. But in this room, the leaders of humanity were planning something that had never been attempted before. The complete destruction of a galactic empire using nothing but intelligence, coordination, and an understanding of psychology. There's one more thing, Dr. Park said. The Zeltharians will never see this coming because they can't imagine that a species like us could be capable of it. To them, we're just primitives from a backward world. They think strength only comes from big ships and bigger weapons. Admiral Williams smiled for the first time since the meeting began. They're about to learn that the deadliest weapon in the galaxy is a human with a plan. President Martinez looked around the table one more time. All in favor of Operation Payback? Every hand went up. 3 months later, the first phase began. It started small. A cargo ship carrying supplies to a Zeltharian base suffered engine failure and had to dump its cargo. A communication relay station experienced technical problems that lasted for several days. A computer virus infected the payroll systems on a dozen different worlds, causing confusion but no real damage. The Zeltharians noticed these problems, but they seemed random and unimportant. Technical failures happened all the time in an empire that big. There was no pattern that anyone could see, but on Earth, in a secret facility buried under a mountain, Hundreds of human analysts watched every move the Empire made. They tracked every ship, monitored every communication, and noted every response to their subtle attacks. Dr. Vasquez stood in front of a wall-sized display that showed the entire Zeltharian Empire. Red dots marked locations where their operations had caused problems. Green dots showed where rebellions were being organized. Blue dots indicated psychological warfare targets. "How are we doing?" President Martinez asked. "Better than expected," Dr. Vasquez replied. "The Empire is starting to show stress fractures. Their response times are getting slower. Their commanders are beginning to doubt their intelligence networks. And the rebel groups are more organized than we hoped." "Any sign that they suspect us?" "None. They're looking for saboteurs among their own people. It hasn't occurred to them that humans might be responsible." President Martinez nodded. "Good. Sarah died to give us this chance. We're not going to waste it." On the display, new red dots appeared as another wave of accidents struck Zeltharian facilities. The Empire was beginning to bleed, one small cut at a time. And somewhere in the darkness of space, human ships moved silently toward their targets, carrying weapons that the Empire would never expect: hope, knowledge, and the promise of freedom. Captain Jack Morrison adjusted his breathing mask as his small ship approached the mining station in the Nexus sector. The asteroid facility looked like a massive metal spider hanging in space, its arms reaching out to grab chunks of valuable ore from the surrounding rock field. Thousands of alien workers lived inside that station, all of them slaves to the Zeltharian Empire. Jack's ship was designed to look like a cargo vessel from the Traders Guild, one of the few independent organizations the Empire still allowed to operate. His fake identification papers would pass any normal inspection. But there was nothing normal about this mission. In the cargo hold of his ship, sealed in hidden compartments, were weapons. Not the kind of weapons that most people would recognize. No guns or bombs or missiles. These were information packages, communication devices, and detailed technical specifications. Jack was carrying the tools of revolution. Approaching docking bay 7, he said into his radio, requesting permission to dock. The voice that replied was tired and mechanical. "State your business, cargo vessel." "Delivering medical supplies to the worker dormitories." "Standard humanitarian shipment." There was a pause. "Then cleared for docking. Stay in the designated areas. Any attempt to access restricted zones will result in immediate detention." Jack smiled as his ship settled into the docking bay. The Empire was so arrogant that they didn't even bother to inspect humanitarian shipments carefully. After all, who would waste time smuggling weapons to slaves who had no hope of rebellion? The answer, of course, was humanity. The docking bay was filled with aliens of dozens of different species. Most of them wore the gray uniforms of workers, marked with identification numbers instead of names. They moved slowly, their shoulders bent with exhaustion and despair. These beings had been working in the mines for so long that they had forgotten what freedom felt like. But Jack could see something else in their eyes when they thought no one was looking. Anger, hatred. The desire for revenge that burned so hot it could melt metal. Zeltharian Overseer approached Jack's ship. The creature was smaller than the Empire's soldiers, but still dangerous. Its skin was pale green and its eyes were like black stones. It carried a shock stick that could stun or kill with a touch. "You are the medical supplier?" the Overseer asked. "That's right," Jack replied, handing over his identification papers. "Standard delivery. Pain medication. Antibiotics, basic surgical supplies." The Overseer looked at the papers without much interest. "Unload quickly. The workers have quotas to meet." Jack began moving boxes from his ship to a wheeled cart. Each box was labeled with medical terms and bore the seal of the Traders Guild. But hidden inside some of the boxes were things the Empire would never expect to find in a humanitarian shipment: communication devices that could talk to rebel cells across the galaxy, technical manuals showing how to disable Zeltharian security systems, weapons designed to be built from mining equipment, and most importantly, proof that they were not alone, that somewhere out there other species were fighting back. As Jack worked, he noticed a particular alien watching him. The creature looked like a cross between a bear and a lizard with thick fur and scales. Its identification tag read, Worker 4471, but Jack knew its real name was Thais. According to human intelligence, Thais was the leader of the resistance movement in this sector. Jack dropped a small device near Thiss's feet as he passed. To anyone watching, it would look like an accident. But Thiss understood. The device contained coordinates for a secret meeting. 3 hours later, Jack found himself in a maintenance tunnel deep inside the asteroid. The air was hot and filled with the smell of metal and sweat. Thiss was waiting for him along with 5 other aliens from different species. "You are the human," Thiss said. It was not a question. "I am," Jack replied. "My name is Morrison. I bring greetings from Earth and from the Free Alliance." One of the other aliens, a creature with 6 arms and crystal-like skin, leaned forward. "The Free Alliance? We have never heard of such a thing." Jack smiled. "That's because it didn't exist until 6 months ago. But it's growing fast. 17 different species have already joined. More are asking to be included every day." He opened a small case and pulled out a holographic projector. When he activated it, the tunnel filled with images of alien worlds. But these were not the gray industrial slave worlds that the Empire created. These were green and blue planets where different species lived in freedom. "This is Krillos Prime," Jack said, pointing to one of the images. "The Krillians drove out the Zeltharian governors 3 months ago. This is New Thakara. The mining slaves there took control of their entire system. And this is Zephyr Station. The workers there built their own fleet and are now helping to liberate other worlds." The aliens stared at the images. Thiss spoke first. "How is this possible?" "The Empire has ruled for thousands of years. No one has ever successfully rebelled. No one has ever had human help before," Jack replied. "We've been studying the Empire for decades. We know their weaknesses. We know how to hit them where it hurts most." He changed the display to show technical diagrams. "These are the plans for the Empire's security systems. With these, you can disable their cameras, their alarms, and their communication networks. These other plans show you how to turn mining equipment into weapons, and this," he highlighted a particular section, "this shows you how to take control of the asteroid's navigation systems." The 6-armed alien gasped. "You want us to move the entire asteroid?" "Why not?" Jack asked. "This facility produces enough rare metals to supply a dozen star systems. If it suddenly disappeared from Imperial control, it would be a major blow to their economy. And if it reappeared as a free mining station, it would be a symbol of hope for slaves everywhere." Thiss looked at the other resistance leaders. Jack could see them communicating in ways that humans couldn't understand, through pheromones, electrical signals, and telepathic connections. Different species had different methods, but the message was the same. This was their chance. "What do you need from us?" Thiss asked. Jack smiled. "Just follow the plan. In exactly 37 days at 0300 station time, you will begin the takeover. At that same moment, resistance groups on 48 other worlds will begin their own rebellions. The Empire won't be able to respond to all of them at once." He handed Thiss a small communication device. "This will keep you in contact with the other rebel groups. You'll be able to coordinate your actions and share intelligence. And after we take the station, what then? Then you become part of the Free Alliance. You govern yourselves according to your own laws and customs. You trade freely with whoever you choose, and you help other slaves win their freedom." One of the aliens, a creature that looked like a walking plant, spoke in a voice like rustling leaves. "And the humans? What do you want in return for this help?" Jack looked each of them in the eye. "We want the Empire to fall. They murdered our diplomat. They think they can intimidate us because we're smaller and weaker than they are. They're about to learn that size and strength aren't the only kinds of power." The meeting lasted for 2 more hours. Jack explained the details of the plan, answered questions, and provided additional equipment. When it was over, he felt confident that these beings would do their part when the time came. But the mining station was just one target. Over the next few weeks, Jack and teams like his visited dozens of other locations throughout the Empire. Some were slave worlds where billions of aliens lived under Zeltharian rule. Others were industrial centers that produced weapons and ships for the Imperial fleet. A few were communication hubs that carried messages across the galaxy. At each location, the human teams made contact with resistance groups that had been waiting generations for a chance to strike back. They provided weapons, intelligence, and most importantly, the knowledge that they were not alone. Meanwhile, other human operations were targeting the Empire in different ways. Computer viruses continued to infect Zeltharian networks, causing delays and confusion. Supply convoys experienced mysterious accidents that left them stranded in deep space. Communication relays suffered technical failures that isolated entire star systems for days at a time. On Earth, Dr. Elena Vasquez monitored the Empire's responses from her command center. The wall displays showed thousands of data points, troop movements, communication traffic, economic indicators, and political intelligence. "They're starting to panic," she reported to President Martinez during one of their daily briefings. "The number of security alerts has tripled in the past month. They're pulling ships from the frontier to guard core systems, and Emperor Vorthak has replaced 3 of his top generals in the past 2 weeks. Do they suspect us yet?" the president asked. "They're looking for saboteurs, but they're focused on their own people. The idea that humans could be responsible hasn't occurred to them yet. To them, we're still just a primitive species that got lucky with one diplomat. Let's keep it that way as long as possible." Dr. Vasquez nodded. "The psychological warfare campaign is also working better than expected. The Whisper of the Void messages are spreading through Zeltharian space faster than we hoped." The Whisper of the Void was Dr. Park's masterstroke. The rebellion began at exactly 0300 station time, just as Captain Morrison had promised. On 49 different worlds across the Zeltharian Empire, slaves who had served for generations suddenly became warriors. The uprising was so perfectly coordinated that Imperial commanders initially thought it was a massive computer glitch in their reporting systems. On the mining station where Theiss led his people, the revolution started in the maintenance tunnels. Worker 4471 was no longer just a number. He was Commander Theiss of the Free Mining Alliance. Using the technical specifications that Morrison had provided, his team disabled every security camera and alarm system in the facility within the first 10 minutes. The Zeltharian overseers didn't know what was happening until it was too late. They woke up to find their weapons gone, their communication systems jammed, and themselves surrounded by aliens they had considered broken and defeated. Some tried to fight back. Others surrendered immediately. A few managed to send brief distress signals before the communications went dead completely. But this revolution was just one small part of a much larger plan. On the factory world of Mechanos 7, the Krillian workers had been building weapons in secret for months, using stolen materials and hidden workshops. When the signal came, they emerged from their dormitories armed with laser rifles and plasma grenades. The Zeltharian garrison was overwhelmed within hours. In the Outer Rim territories, entire star systems declared independence simultaneously. The Empire's response fleets found themselves facing coordinated attacks from multiple directions. Ships that should have been carrying slaves and raw materials were instead filled with organized resistance fighters. Admiral Catherine Torres watched the chaos unfold from the bridge of her command ship, hidden in the shadow of a dead star. The human fleet had been waiting in dark space for months, monitoring Imperial communications and preparing for this moment. "Status report," she ordered. Commander Sarah Blake looked up from her tactical display. 47 successful rebellions confirmed. 2 failed. The garrison on Tyrannos 4 was stronger than our intelligence indicated. The uprising on Helios Station was discovered before it could begin. What about Imperial response? "They're scrambling. Fleet units are being pulled from Border Patrol to deal with the rebellions, but they don't have enough ships to handle this many simultaneous uprisings. Some systems won't see Imperial reinforcements for weeks." Torres smiled. This was exactly what they had hoped for. The Empire's strength came from its ability to concentrate overwhelming force against any single threat. But when faced with dozens of threats at once, that strength became a weakness. "Begin Phase 2, she ordered. Across human space, ships that had been disguised as cargo vessels and research stations suddenly revealed their true nature. They were fast attack craft loaded with advanced weapons and equipment. More importantly, they were crewed by humans who understood something that the Empire had never learned. That winning a war wasn't about having the biggest ships, but about being smarter than your enemy. The human fleet didn't attack Imperial strongholds directly. Instead, they targeted supply lines, communication relays, and isolated patrol ships. They struck fast and disappeared before the Empire could respond. Each attack was small and seemingly unimportant, but together they began to strangle the Imperial war. Machine Dr. Elena Vasquez coordinated the entire operation from her command center on Earth. The displays around her showed real-time intelligence from across the galaxy. Red indicators marked Imperial forces. Green showed successful rebellions. Blue tracked human fleet movements. The psychological warfare campaign is exceeding all expectations, Dr. Park reported. Imperial morale is collapsing faster than their military position. We're intercepting panic communications from Zeltharian commanders who think their own troops are turning against them. The Whisper of the Void campaign had evolved into something even more effective. Instead of just mysterious voices and symbols, human agents were now spreading rumors that the Empire's downfall had been prophesied thousands of years ago. Ancient Zeltharian texts, carefully edited by human scholars, seemed to predict exactly what was happening. Zeltharian soldiers began to desert their posts. Officers refused orders, claiming they were afraid of supernatural punishment. On some worlds, Imperial governors declared neutrality rather than fight against what they believed was fate itself. But the real breakthrough came when human intelligence teams managed to crack the Empire's central communication network. Suddenly, every message between Imperial commanders was being intercepted and decoded by human analysts. "We can see everything they're planning," Dr. Vasquez reported to President Martinez. "Their fleet movements, their strategies, even their private communications. We know what they're going to do before they do it." The information advantage was devastating. Imperial fleets would arrive at rebel systems only to find that the rebels had already escaped or prepared perfect ambushes. Relief convoys would be attacked precisely when they were most vulnerable. Even the Empire's attempts at secret negotiations with various alien species were known to human intelligence within hours. Emperor Vorthak sat in his throne room and tried to understand how his empire was falling apart so quickly. The reports made no sense. How could primitive mining slaves defeat trained Imperial soldiers? How could cargo vessels outrun military starships? How could rebels with stolen equipment match the Empire's advanced technology? "It has to be an inside conspiracy," he told General Krex. "Someone with access to our highest-level communications is feeding information to the rebels." Krex nodded nervously. The Emperor had already executed 2 other generals for failing to stop the rebellions. "My Emperor, we have investigated everyone with security clearance. We found no evidence of betrayal. Then investigate them again. Use mind scanners, use torture, use whatever methods you need." But while the Empire was busy looking for traitors among its own people, the real enemy remained invisible. Human ships continued to strike at Imperial targets and disappear. Rebel groups continued to receive weapons and intelligence from sources that seemed to know everything about Imperial operations. The breakthrough moment came when Admiral Torres received intelligence about a major Imperial fleet movement. Emperor Vorthak was personally leading a massive force to retake the rebellious Nexus sector. It would be the largest Imperial fleet assembled in decades, over 300 ships including the Emperor's personal dreadnought. "This is our chance," Torres told her commanders. "If we can defeat or capture the Emperor himself, the entire Empire will collapse. But attacking such a large fleet directly would be suicide." The human forces were outnumbered 50 to 1. Instead, Torres planned something that no Imperial commander would expect, a trap that used the Empire's own size against it. The plan required perfect timing and coordination with the rebel forces. As the Imperial fleet approached the Nexus sector, human ships began appearing at seemingly random locations throughout Zeltharian space. They attacked communication stations, supply depots, and isolated patrol ships. To Imperial observers, it looked like humanity was finally revealing its true military strength. Emperor Vorthak took the bait. Convinced that he was facing the main human fleet, he ordered all available ships to converge on the Nexus sector. It was exactly what Torres had hoped for. While the Emperor's attention was focused on the Nexus sector, human special forces teams launched the most audacious operation in galactic history. Using intelligence provided by the rebel networks, they infiltrated Zelthar Prime itself. Colonel Maria Santos led the mission. Her team of 50 humans landed on the capital world using stolen Imperial shuttles and forged identification codes. They wore disguises that made them look like various alien species, and they carried weapons that would leave no trace. Their target was not the Imperial Palace. That was too heavily defended. Instead, they headed for the planet's central communication hub. If they could take control of it, they could broadcast a message to every world in the Empire simultaneously. The mission was supposed to take 6 hours. It took 4. Imperial security on Zelthar Prime had become so focused on protecting the Emperor that they had overlooked other critical targets. The communication hub was guarded by a small force of regular soldiers who had never faced human combat tactics. Santos and her team moved through the facility like ghosts. They used non-lethal weapons when possible, preferring to leave guards unconscious rather than dead. When they reached the central control room, they found it protected by advanced security systems that would have stopped most intruders. But humans had spent months studying those systems. Santos's technical specialist, Sergeant Kim Park, disabled every alarm and lock within minutes. "We're in," Santos reported to Admiral Torres. "Beginning broadcast in 30 seconds. Across the galaxy, on billions of screens and communication devices, the normal Imperial programming suddenly stopped. In its place appeared the image of a human woman in military uniform standing in what was obviously an Imperial communication center. "Citizens of the galaxy," Colonel Santos said. "My name is Maria Santos, representing the Free Alliance of Liberated Worlds. For too long, the Zeltharian Empire has ruled through fear and oppression. Today, that rule ends." 6 months after Ambassador Sarah Chen's execution, President Maria Martinez stood in what had once been the Imperial throne room on Zelthar Prime. The massive chamber had been transformed, from a symbol of oppression into something entirely new. The meeting hall of the Galactic Assembly, where Emperor Vorthak's bone throne had once dominated the room. There was now a circular arrangement of seats representing hundreds of different species. The walls that had displayed trophies from conquered worlds now showed flags from free systems that had chosen to join the new government. Martinez looked around the chamber and marveled at how much had changed. Delegates from across the galaxy sat together as equals. Former slaves next to former citizens, predator species alongside their traditional prey, being so different that they needed translation devices just to communicate. Yet somehow they were making it work. The revolution had succeeded beyond humanity's wildest expectations. What had started as a plan to avenge one diplomat's death had become the liberation of half the galaxy. 47 worlds had declared independence during the initial uprising. Within 3 months, that number had grown to over 200. Many systems had simply declared themselves free the moment they learned that the empire was collapsing. But victory had brought its own challenges. How do you govern a territory that spans thousands of light years and includes billions of beings from hundreds of different species? How do you create peace between civilizations that have been enemies for millennia? How do you build something better from the ruins of tyranny? The answer, as it turned out, was very carefully. "The morning session of the Galactic Assembly is now in order," announced this, the former mining slave who now served as the Assembly's speaker. His voice carried clearly through the chamber's advanced translation systems. "First item on today's agenda is the proposal from the Krillian delegation regarding trade routes in the former Imperial Sector 7. Martinez smiled as she watched the proceedings. 6 months ago, these beings had been slaves who couldn't even speak without permission. Now they were debating complex economic policies and voting on legislation that would affect billions of lives. The transformation hadn't been easy. In the immediate aftermath of the Empire's collapse, many systems had descended into chaos. Old ethnic conflicts that had been suppressed under Imperial rule suddenly erupted. Criminal organizations moved in to fill the power vacuum. Some worlds declared independence only to find themselves unable to maintain basic services. That's where humanity's second phase had begun. Just as they had provided weapons and intelligence to the rebels, they now provided expertise and resources to the new governments. Human engineers helped rebuild damaged infrastructure. Human doctors established hospitals on worlds where medical care had been reserved for the ruling class. Human teachers set up schools that taught formerly enslaved children that they could dream of futures beyond servitude. Most importantly, humans helped establish the framework for the new government. They shared the lessons they had learned from their own history, the importance of written constitutions, the separation of powers, the protection of minority rights, and the idea that governments derive their authority from the consent of the governed. Admiral Catherine Torres entered the chamber and approached Martinez's seat. "Sorry I'm late," she said quietly. "I was dealing with the situation in the Outer Rim." "How bad is it?" Martinez asked. "Better than expected. The Zeltharian holdout forces in Sector 12 have agreed to surrender. That leaves only about a dozen systems still claiming loyalty to the old empire." This was another challenge that humanity had anticipated. Not every Zeltharian had accepted the new order. Some military units had retreated to remote systems and declared themselves the true empire. A few planetary governors had refused to acknowledge the Assembly's authority. Some Zeltharian civilians, raised to believe in their species' natural superiority, could not accept being equal to beings they had always considered inferior. The Assembly's response had been both firm and merciful. Zeltharian military units that surrendered were offered amnesty and the chance to join the new Galactic Defense Force. Governors who cooperated with the transition were allowed to remain in administrative positions. Even ordinary Zeltharian citizens were welcomed as equal members of the new society. But those who continued to resist faced the full force of the liberated galaxy. The Galactic Defense Force, commanded by Admiral Torres and staffed by volunteers from dozens of species, had proven remarkably effective at dealing with holdout forces. "What about Emperor Vorthak?" Martinez asked. Torres's expression darkened. "He's still in custody on Tribunal Station. The trial is scheduled to begin next month." The question of what to do with the former emperor had been one of the Assembly's most difficult decisions. Many delegates wanted him executed immediately. Others argued for life imprisonment. A few even suggested exile to an uninhabited world. In the end, they had chosen something unprecedented in galactic history: a public trial where Vorthak would face charges for crimes against sentient beings. Representatives from every species that had suffered under Imperial rule would have the chance to present evidence and testimony. The trial would be broadcast across the galaxy, serving both as justice and as a reminder of why the old order had been destroyed. Dr. Elena Vasquez joined Martinez and Torres in the observation gallery. She looked tired but satisfied. The past 6 months had been the busiest of her career, coordinating the establishment of new governments across hundreds of worlds. "How are the integration programs working?" Martinez asked. "Better than we hoped," Vasquez replied. "The Zeltharian rehabilitation centers are actually oversubscribed. We have more applicants than spaces. It turns out that many ordinary Zeltharians are genuinely grateful to be free from their old society's restrictions. This had been one of humanity's most important insights. The Zeltharian Empire hadn't just oppressed other species. It had also oppressed most Zeltharians. The rigid caste system, the constant fear of punishment, the requirement to serve the state above all else, had made life miserable for everyone except the highest elites. Many Zeltharians were discovering that they preferred a society where they could choose their own careers, express their own opinions, and live without constant surveillance. The rehabilitation programs helped them adjust to concepts like individual rights, democratic participation, and peaceful coexistence with other species. "What about the economic situation?" Torres asked. "Improving steadily? The trade networks are stabilizing, and production is back up to 80% of pre-revolution levels on most worlds. The elimination of tribute payments to the Empire has freed up enormous resources for local development." This was another area where humanity's planning had paid off. They had anticipated that the collapse of the Empire would disrupt galactic trade and had prepared detailed plans for rebuilding commercial networks. Instead of one central authority controlling all trade, the new system was based on voluntary agreements between free systems. The session in the Assembly chamber continued. Martinez watched as delegates debated a proposal to establish a galactic university system where young beings from different species could study together. The idea would have been unthinkable under the Empire, where education was strictly segregated by species and social class. "You know," Torres said quietly, "sometimes I still can't believe we actually did it. 6 months ago, the Zeltharian Empire seemed like an eternal fixture of the galaxy. Now it's gone." "Not gone," Martinez corrected. "Transformed. The same stars, the same worlds, the same people, just organized in a completely different way." Dr. Vasquez nodded. That was always the key insight. We didn't need to destroy the Empire physically. We just needed to change how people thought about power and authority. The session was interrupted by a commotion near the main entrance. Martinez turned to see what was happening and felt her breath catch. A group of humans was entering the chamber, but these weren't officials or diplomats. They were wearing the blue uniforms of Earth's diplomatic corps. Leading them was Director James Chen, Ambassador Sarah Chen's brother. The assembly chamber gradually fell silent as delegates noticed the new arrivals. Director Chen walked to the center of the chamber and looked around at the hundreds of beings who now govern themselves freely. "Honored delegates," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the translation systems. "I bring greetings from the people of Earth and a message from the family of Ambassador Sarah Chen." He paused and pulled out a simple piece of paper. "My sister believed that all beings deserve to live in freedom and dignity. She died for that belief. Today, looking at this assembly, I know that her death was not in vain." The chamber erupted in applause. Beings from dozens of species rose to their feet and honored the memory of the human diplomat whose execution had set these events in motion. When the applause finally died down, Director Chen continued. "The family of Ambassador Chen wishes to announce the establishment of the Sarah Chen Foundation for Galactic Education. This foundation will provide scholarships for young beings from across the galaxy to study at any institution of their choosing, regardless of their species or system of origin.